Hi guys. I just wanted to try and give you a little bit of advice. This is only based on my personal opinion, and I take no responsibility if this doesn't come to light or it doesn't come true, or this isn't the situation at all. But just to give people a little bit of background, I've been traveling to the Philippines now for probably over about 30 years. I've also worked in the travel industry for a Filipino travel agent. Not only that, I'm fully up to date with what's happening in the Philippines right now. And in terms of the country, I'm a Brit living in the UK, or in terms of this exercise, I'm a foreigner who would dearly love to go to the Philippines. Obviously, I have family out there, and I try and travel there 2 or 3 times a year. Right now, it's just coming into August, and a lot of people are planning their trips back home and deciding whether they should go to the Philippines or not. A number of people have been messaging me, asking me for my opinion on whether it's safe to go there right now. What would happen if the lockdown gets worse? Would they lose money if they book a flight? And what the reality is. Now, this is my personal opinion. I got a question from somebody earlier on today about whether they should travel to the Philippines this October and or November. They are a British citizen. However, they were a former Filipino citizen, i.e. when they came to the country, they were Filipino. They then became British, which means they've lost their Philippine nationality. Now, to make things very clear, you may be a Filipino living in America or living in Europe or living in the UK, but you may have then got nationality of that country. If you lose your Philippine nationality, even if you retain your Philippine passport and maybe it's expired, even if you are a Balit Bayan, i.e. you are a Filipino who's lost your Philippine nationality, you've become British, for example, you can still travel to the Philippines on Balit Bayan status, meaning you can still travel to stay in the Philippines for a year, you get an extended visa, you can get more than the 28 days. However, it doesn't mean that you can go to the Philippines at this time. At this time, the only way that you can go to the Philippines as a foreigner is if you have a long-term visa or a permanent visa. I believe this is from August the 3rd. As a foreigner, you're referred to as a foreigner, even if you are a former Filipino citizen. Right now, you can't visit the Philippines due to the COVID-19 restrictions. I would say check with your embassy to get the latest advice, but it's no good if you have the Philippine passport and a foreign passport and you haven't reacquired your Filipino citizenship. The only way that you can travel to the Philippines currently is if you become Filipino again, but you have to have documents to prove that you've reacquired your Philippine nationality after you've gained your foreign nationality. For example, you were on a Filipino passport, you then became British, so you're a British national, you're no longer a legal Philippine citizen. You need to reacquire your Filipino nationality and have documents to prove that. If you have those documents, you can currently enter the Philippines. Now, the question is, should you buy an airline ticket and should you travel there in the next couple of months? For me personally, I would say now is not a good time. And the reason why I say that is we really don't know what's going to happen. You know, we could have a situation in the UK where we have another peak. You know, we have winter flu coming about. And who's to say there's not going to be another spike in COVID-19 cases? If there is another spike in COVID-19 cases, then obviously the Philippine government will ban people coming from the United Kingdom or coming from America or whatsoever. That's your first problem. And the second problem is we don't know what's happening in the Philippines right now. Right now there are about 50,000 infections, but thankfully they've managed it very well. So far, there's around about up to 2,000 deaths, and that's still very good if you compare that to Western standards, but we really don't know what lays ahead or lies ahead. There could be a spike in infections. Just I heard in the news today that in Spain, they've now got a spike in infections and they've reintroduced this 14-day quarantine. So if you are a British citizen and you come back from Spain to the UK, you then have to quarantine yourself for 14 days. Now think about it. If you're a Filipino and you're on some kind of leave from work, you maybe take a 3-week holiday. You've got to think about it. When you come back to the UK, you've also got to take another 2 weeks holiday regarding flights, regarding should you book a ticket. I would say this: if you are going to book a flight to the Philippines anytime this year, I would book it directly with the airline. I would use one of the big travel agents like lastminute.com, Expedia, Apodo, because they all come with a very simple guide on can you get a refund, can you rebook without a charge. I would be very careful with the smaller travel agencies unless you know specifically that you can cancel without charge, because we don't know what's going to happen in November. There could be an increase in infections or there could be a decrease. It could be managed very well by then. But the situation is it's too early to say. We don't know when the Philippine government is going to release the restriction on foreigners visiting the Philippines. And then, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with COVID-19. So can you go to the Philippines again this year? I don't know. And the other issue is insurance. Because COVID-19 is a known event, and the advice at the moment in many embassies around the world is to only go to the Philippines if it's essential because of the COVID-19. So, for example, the UK advice is only leave the UK if you really have to leave the UK. This means your insurance would then become invalid, which meant that if you went to the Philippines and you got sick, you've got to think about the cost of medical bills. God forbid, if you got COVID-19 in the Philippines, you'd be talking about 2 or 3 million pesos if you had to go into intensive care. And unless you are a Philippine citizen in a public hospital, you're not covered. So as much as I would love to go back home to the Philippines maybe before December 2020, but I really can't say. If I was going to plan to go, I would plan, say, late November. But then, of course, you've got price increases. Airlines put up the cost of their tickets. It really is a gamble. I would think about maybe February or March next year, we might be in a better position. But going this year, I really don't know. It's a risk you take. If you can get a fully refundable ticket and you can get sufficient travel insurance, and if you can take a leave and then cancel it if things change, then I would say yes, take a risk. But if it's the case that you have to go home in an emergency or something, I would say check with the Philippine embassy to get the latest advice. You may need to reacquire your Philippine citizenship if you are a Filipino national who's lost your citizenship. But me personally, I'd love to go home to the Philippines tomorrow if I could. But realistically, I don't know when foreigners will be allowed to enter the Philippines again. And even when foreigners are allowed to enter the Philippines again, you could be in the Philippines, there could be another spike, and then you might either have to leave the country early, or there could be a lockdown or an ECQ, and you may find yourself being stuck in the Philippines for weeks and weeks, which is what's happened to the people who went in April. Some of them are still stuck in the Philippines right now. This is not the fault of the government in any way. This is just because of this ECQ, GCQ. Obviously, smaller airlines are not going to fly if they've only got a few passengers on their aeroplane, which means it's all right if you're going to Manila, but if you're going to the province, the issue is, will a plane take you to and from that province? And if not, you're completely stuck. So I know it's a very difficult time for the tourism industry, for the travel industry, for the hotel industry in the Philippines, but until we have a firm idea, until we know what's happening, it's really hard to say whether going right now is a good thing. I would say until I know the lockdown's been completely removed, until there are no travel restrictions, I wouldn't even think about booking a ticket to the Philippines or booking a holiday to the Philippines because right now it's a gamble. And if you have the money to be able to gamble, if you have the money to be able to buy a ticket, and if you don't use it, you pay a penalty or whatever, then sure, go ahead if you have a flexible leave. But if you say, I have to go in October and I've got these 2 weeks, for me, I wouldn't bank on it personally. Anyway, guys, I hope that was helpful. That's just my personal opinion, because as I said, a lot of people are asking me. Thanks, guys.